Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a very powerful show for you today. Later in the show, we're going to be meeting Dominika Dvorzhak. She's here to celebrate her debut picture book. It's called One and Only. But first up, Kathi Lockwood is here to celebrate the King and the Monster. This episode is brought to you by Feliz Navidad. It's December of 2019, and Pittsburgh is covered in a terrible fog. Even worse, all of the reindeer get sick and they can't fly. Everyone in the North Pole is worried they'll have to cancel Christmas. But just when all hope seems lost, Santa's pet, Feliz Navidad, raises his paw to help. And while a dog is not quite a reindeer, Feliz is their last chance to save Christmas. This is a book about perseverance and grit. Feliz Navidad, the story of how Santa's dog saved Christmas. Get your copy today. Feliz Navidad by Ari and Rhea Helper. John is right now from the beautiful Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. Our guest is here today to celebrate a really important book. It's called The King and the Monster. It's a new picture book from our guest, Kathi Lockwood. Kathi, how are you?
I am very well, and thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my work.
Delighted to have you on, and you come from a beautiful part of the world. The Poconos is just a gorgeous part of the Northeast United States. It's a gorgeous part of the world.
Yes, it is. Beautiful. Living in the woods, and only an hour and a half from Manhattan, so it's the best of all worlds.
Absolutely. So tell us about The King and the Monster. This is a pretty heavy, or at least it's a picture book that addresses some pretty heavy subjects.
You're right. It addresses the whole concept of addiction. And I can tell you the history of why I wrote this book. My son, 2 years ago, went into treatment. His daughter was 6 years old. And my daughter, I had already written a few children's books, and my daughter-in-law asked me to write another book for her, to explain why her father had to move away for like months and go into treatment. So she called me and asked me to do that. And I said, sure, I'll write that book for you. And then I hung up the phone and I thought, ooh, how would I ever do that? It's like, how do you explain addiction to a 6-year-old? It's such a complex subject, and there's so much that even adults don't understand about it. So I just put it out of my mind for about a week or so, and then one night, while I was in a deep meditation, I closed my eyes, put in my noise-canceling earbuds, and listened to music, and the whole book came to me from the title. I hadn't even thought what would the title be, but the title came, and then all the story, just page after page and vision after vision and page after page during my meditation. And so as soon as it came to the last page, I'm like, oh, I better write this down, So that was my first draft. And after that, while it was in its draft form, I had shared it with people that were in AA 30 years and friends of mine and friends running treatment homes. And they each gave me a little sentence to tweak it here and there. And one of the most important things about this book is that it has an image of a shadow in the king's heart. And according to Dr. Mate, who's like a very renowned addiction therapist, he feels that all addictions are caused by trauma. So in my book, I illustrate that trauma as a shadow in the heart, and it can be translated by the parent or the reader to the child as a broken heart or a sad heart. And that is the reason why the king feels he can go to the quicksand pit, where he's been warned against it, but he goes there because he's looking for relief from that sadness in his heart. But when he gets to the quicksand pit, he puts his hand in it and realizes it's a trap. And I think that's a really important issue, is that addiction is a trap. It's not something someone says, oh, I think I'll be addicted and go live in a gutter somewhere. And that's one of the suggestions I had from a person in recovery for 30 years. He said, in the beginning, the monster acts like it's your friend. And then it takes over. And then the person begins to act like a monster. But when we're going back to the shadow, I make a very important point that shadow was there long before the children were born. Because children see things differently. They interpret things differently. They see the world. They are the individual that creates everything in the world. It's the sense of causality. And they are the cause of this. And they feel that they're the cause of that as they're in their young hearts and in their young minds. And we don't want children to think that they're the cause of the problems that the family has. That's a really important issue. So I make sure that I say in this book that the shadow in the king's heart was there from long ago, and it shrunk when the children were born. And then it is because he wants the monster takes over and he starts acting like a monster, and he's separated from his family emotionally, and sometimes that's physically also. And the reason why he goes to the healing house or asks for help is because he misses his family and he wants his family back. He loves his children, he loves his wife, and he wants them back in his life. And that is the reason why he goes to the healing house. And when the healing helpers, in my original story, when I first saw the image, I saw people running down a hill with white coats flapping. That was the image I got in my meditation. But then I talked to my son, and he's like, oh, those healing helpers, they're really powerful people. So I changed them into superheroes, and they come flying down with big H on their chest. So it's a children's picture book, and it has some adventure, and it has superheroes, and it has a wisdom tree in the village that everybody hangs around, and it has guardian angels in the sky that are always there watching over the king and giving him messages, how much they love him and they support him, and they give him the courage to go to the healing house. So
it sounds like an incredibly powerful book, and certainly one that is needed.
Yes, really needed, because my books are written for the children because they're picture books and they have beautiful illustrations and they're adventurous, but they're also really good for the parents and those other people in the family, because addiction is like a family disease. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to, when that person starts acting like a monster, if it is a drug, for instance, but that's not the only addiction there is, of course, but if it is a drug, they lose their personality. And it's easy to, condemn that person or to say, oh, he's such a jerk. But in fact, this book is really good in helping everybody in the family or in the relationship with that person separate the disease, the monster, from the king. The king remains the wonderful, loving person he always was, even though he's acting this way. They know that the king's personality has never really changed. It looks like it has, but it's the monster that changes it. And once you separate the monster from the king, you can still continue to love and support the king throughout his passage of illness and through healing. It's also very important now in the language of healing not to say the king is an addict, because it's sort of like saying someone is cancer when they have cancer. It isn't they aren't the cancer. They have a disease, and then they go to healing and they get better. And the same is true with addiction. Addiction is a disease, and then people go through healing and then they get better. And pardon me?
It's interesting that you are making that distinction. I know lots of people who have been in AA for a long time, and they are adamant that, no, I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm never going to be healed. I'm always going to have that. Did you get any pushback from those experts in that area?
Well, actually, it's the experts that I've been following that are saying that's not, you can say that because that was something else that was given to me by a person who runs one of the rehab centers. The monster never really goes away. Mm-hmm. In my original story, I said, the monster went away and the king went home and everything was fine. And I was told, no, the monster never goes away, but it disappears. Mm-hmm. So yes, there is if you have like if you're diabetic and you take your medicine and you're healthy, doesn't mean that you can stop taking your medicine and you'll be better. You're still diabetic. You still have diabetes. Mm-hmm. So I guess you could say people who think that way realize that the monster never really disappears, and they always have to keep their guard up. Uh-huh. And, in the healing house, one of the visuals I got in my meditation was the king sitting on a horse dressed in an armor and using a lightsaber. And the healing helpers are showing him, and now we're giving you armor to protect yourself from future monsters. So the monster never really goes away, but it isn't the person. It's something separate from the person. Yeah. But that is something they say. I know that is something, but the newer models of healing are separating the person from the disease. Because once you don't want to say I am anything that you don't really want to be. Uh-huh. Okay. Just metaphysically speaking. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is one of the things that I'm really happy about, and we've been publishing the Reading with Your Kids podcast for 7 years now. We have 2,100 episodes, and one of the things that's very clear is that our society has grown up a whole lot since I was a kid. Now, granted, that was almost 100 years ago, but still, we never talked about these things. We never talked about mental illness. We never talked about depression. If somebody in the family had a mental illness, that was a secret. We can't let anybody know about that. And now I think we're at a point where we can at least now talk about it and get help and talk to our kids about these things. And that makes me happy, makes me hopeful.
And you're right about that, because I remember when anyone going to get help or see a psychologist or a therapist or anything, there was something, it was a bad thing. You would never, it was like a secretive thing. But now people do realize that sometimes as we develop as human beings, just in general, like I see a therapist, I'm okay. But there are times when I have issues and I see someone and we talk it out and I walk out of there feeling better. And that's okay. I don't do it a lot, but when I need it, I have a wonderful person that I, consult with. So in this book, the healing helpers, as I said, are superheroes, and they're just there to help. Mm-hmm. There to help help the king. Another thing that some people have brought up is like, why have a king? And as I said, that title came to me like just spontaneously, and I never really thought about why it is the king. But as time goes on and people say, well, why did you write about a king? I was like, well, when you think about it, the king somewhere in the book says, well, I'm big and strong and powerful and nothing bad can happen to me. And so if something like that can happen to the king, it can happen to anybody. The king isn't, and that's another concept of the book is, even if someone does not have addiction in the family, in the immediate family, or that kind of a problem, the very idea of being able to talk about what could happen, that they're not to be fearful, like I don't have to be afraid of the monster, but when I'm warned not to go to the quicksand pit, this is what could happen. Maybe I'll take that warning more seriously. So as children grow up, they can understand I don't have to be afraid, but I can avoid problems by avoiding these things that, in this case is the quicksand pit, but in other cases could be other things that children may be subject to.
Sure. Yeah. And the problem of addiction, as we know now, it's really an epidemic here in our country. Unfortunately, places not too far from where you are, I'm seeing all the time Kensington Street in Philadelphia. And, we had a part of Boston that was, just overrun with folks with opioid addictions and whatnot. And it's an issue that I think is important to talk about with kids, because there's so many of us, even if it's not our dad or our mom or our sibling, it might be an aunt or an uncle or somebody that was in the neighborhood, one of my friends' parents, so I think it's something that all kids are going to be, are affected by.
And I think one of the important things of my book is this is addressed with compassion. And you see someone who has that illness, who acts like a monster, and yet you're not condemning that person. You're recognizing that that person is still good inside. When my son was going through the worst of his times, my daughters would say, he's such an idiot, he's such a jerk. Don't want to have anything to do with him. Well, he was acting like an idiot and he was acting like a jerk. But my idea was separate, because people who have these problems, one of the main reasons is because they feel shame. They feel like they're not good enough. They have that trauma in their heart. And the last thing in the world they need is other people thinking that or telling them that. So when my son was going through the worst of his problems, I would meditate on it, and I would look at him and remind myself of him as a cute little 5-year-old boy whose heart was golden and who had tender love for everybody and was so sensitive about his cat. And, I looked at him as who he truly was and held that in my mind. And I called it holding him in holy space. And when you can do that with an addict, that's how you're helping them, because there is some kind of an energetic force that happens between people. Emotionally, whether it's spoken or not, sometimes you can tell. And in order to help him heal, I had to help myself look at him compassionately and lovingly. And that's how I felt. It's sort of like a praying for him. People pray. Prayers are sometimes very effective. And so my prayer for him was just recognizing who he truly was outside of the addiction.
Yeah. I like that. And I think that the thing that you said about when your son was acting like a monster, and I think there are times, this is just a parenting tip that I tried to hold in my heart when my kids were younger, when my kids occasionally acted like a monster, I made it a real important point that I didn't say you're a jerk, you're dumb. you're a monster. It was always, you're really acting dumb. You're really acting disrespectfully.
Right.
And just, so you're calling out the behavior instead of labeling the child.
Yes, and that's a perfect example of what this book does with the idea of addiction.
I love how you responded to your daughter-in-law, and when she came to you and said, "I need this, and can you help?" And I know that story kind of sprang from your heart out of love for your son, love for your daughter-in-law, love for your grandchild. But it's something different when you take that thing that's private in your family and you create that tool for your family, and then you say, I'm going to be really vulnerable here and share it with the world. Where did that decision come from? Where did the strength to make that decision come from?
That's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking it, because it was a challenge, and it was something that obviously I had to discuss it with my son and talk it over with him, because I'm not just talking, this is my son, and I don't want to do anything that would hurt him. So I asked him, what do you think about this book? And do you think that do you support me saying that it's you who was the reason why I wrote it? I could have said any family member. I could have just made it a little more discreet, which was my original plan. But he said no. He said, you can say that it's me, because that's part of the healing for him, is to recognize that. Mm-hmm. So yes, it was it wasn't the way it first came out, but after I discussed it with him, then he said, yes, you can use me you can say that it was me that you wrote the book for.
Well, I know people listening are curious as to know how your son and the rest of your family are right now.
Well, like I said, my son recently went into another treatment, which was, hopefully this will be the best. And that's why this book, again, is so important, because as I was talking to my granddaughter, now it's been 2 years since the first time that this happened, and now it's 2 years later, he's back. But now we're talking about it and using the same analogies that are in the book. And she's the one who said, oh, yeah, I know Dad has a broken heart and he needs to go fix it. She used that term. In my book, I used, he has a shadow in his heart, a shadow of sadness. She interpreted that as a broken heart. And she knew that when I said, your dad is going into the healing house because he loves you so much. He wants to be back with you. He wants to be healthy and happy with you. So now she understands what's going on in a whole easy to describe way, because we have this metaphoric story that we're referring to in our language of doing that. The rest of the family also has learned from this. The rest of the family also is like, okay, we love Dominic. He's had he's fallen ill again. He's gone the reverse way, and they all support him. They all love him, and they are all happy that he is in a new treatment place, and they look forward to him being better and joining the family full time.
Well, I will keep him and you and your family in my prayers. Speaking of prayers, one of the things I noticed in the notes that you sent over is that you are an interfaith minister or reverend. Can you tell me, that really fascinated me. Can you tell me what that means?
Well, there are very few seminaries that actually work interfaith, but I attended a seminary, One Spirit Seminary in Manhattan, and we studied the world religions for the first year. So the major world religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, of course. And then for each of those months, we would do some spiritual practice that they would have. And the interesting thing about all religions that you find if you're looking at the more metaphysical aspects of it, like the mystics. So you have the Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart, John of the Cross. You have the mystics like Sufi and like Rumi and Sufism. So every religion has a level of mysticism. And when you read those mystics, they all say the same thing. There's no difference in the religion. My Christmas book, I say, is like an interfaith Christmas book, and I'm still getting a hard time getting people to understand that. But almost every world religion has some image of the human having the light in their heart. And there are like quotes of that in all the spiritual works of almost every major religion. And the reason why I wrote the Christmas book is that in the end of the book, these children realize that they and everyone else has that light in them, the light. You could say the light of Christ. You could say the light of divine love, however you want to define it. So it's just that every single religion has the same spiritual, without the dogma, beliefs, the spiritual beliefs. There is a God. We have life after death. We have a soul. We are a soul.
Well, I've studied world religions, certainly not to the level that you have, but that was one of the things that I came away with too. It's when you get down to the core of it, and what's really important. One of my favorite passages about Jesus is, when they said, "What's the most important commandment?" And he said, "Love God, love each other."
Yeah,
there you go.
And you find that in every religion.
Exactly. That's exactly what I found, and that was really comforting to me. So, I thank you for. I was very curious, and now we know. We should also know where we can go to find out more about The King and the Monster and all the other books that you've written.
Well, it's very simple. My website is booksbykathi.com, and that's a Kathi. And that's all. Booksbykathi.com. They can reach me at Kathi at booksbykathi.com. And all of my work, my books, and my new book is coming out probably in March. It's almost finished now. And it's about the survival of the spirit.
Ooh, well, you have an open invitation to come back and celebrate that book when it's available.
Thank you very much. I think you'll enjoy it.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of The King and the Monster, a very, very important picture book by our guest, Kathi Lockwood. Kathi, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from the beautiful state of California. Our guest is here today to celebrate her debut children's picture book. Is called One and Only. Please welcome to the show the one and only Dominika Dvorzhak. Dominika, hi, how are you?
Hi, Jed. I'm good. Thank you for having me here.
I'm delighted to have you on. What a fascinating subject. One and Only is all about being an only child. Am I correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about the story, please.
Of course. So, One and Only, as you mentioned, it's a book about being an only child, but also parent to an only child. And the main inspiration that stay behind the book is the fact that, well, that's who I am. I am an only child and a mom to an only child. coming from family of only children. My grandma is only child, my mom is only child. So I felt like this is something I can talk about. I just was also wondering if that's something which people would like to read about, specifically children. And then I've noticed, being a mom myself, that there's plenty of books that talks about experience of awaiting a sibling, having a brother or sister, mama being pregnant again, which is all very needed. But I feel like I really wish there would be a book that would represent the voice of those kids like me, who are an only child. I didn't have that book in the childhood, and I felt it's an important topic to talk about. So in One and Only, we follow a little girl in her daily life and how she, interacts with her playmates, colleagues from her classroom, and other adults in her life, like family members. And she hears a list of different opinions and stereotypes about the very fact that she is an only child, and how we notice what type of emotions it evokes in her. We witness how she refers to her mom to talk about it, and how she simply tries to make sense of any of the things she hears. I feel that's important to talk about.
Hey, I agree. It's fascinating. You shared with us that you are an only child. You're the mom of an only child, and your mother was an only child.
Yes.
I'm curious. Was this something a conscious decision by your entire family?
That's exactly an important subject to talk about. Sometimes it's a decision, and it's decision to be respected, and I think there is lots of this type of rhetoric and dialogue around the fact that somebody decides to be a parent just to an only child as something to pity, as something to be said about or question it. So sometimes it was a decision, but sometimes it's not only in context of my family, but I think many families I spoke with, that sometimes the decision is made for people. It's non-decision. And that's why I feel that book is important, because there's plenty of families who actually had different plans for their lives. They maybe dreamt of having a bigger family, but that somehow was not something which was in cards for them. They maybe suffered secondary infertility and other health problems, financial issues, relationship issues that prevented them from that decision. And I feel that often parents of only children are called selfish. And I think that's very unfair, because I think that's the farthest you could call those people, because this actually indicates that they ask themselves questions, even though we really want to, should we? Because maybe, that there is already an existing family member, and that decision can impact, the cascade of another following circumstances that will come with that decision. So that's something which I really wanted to talk about. And also the fact that only children do not have that decision. The parents decide whether or not they want to grow the family further. And so in my personal life, it was mix of both, I believe, and as per my knowledge. But that's something which I wish would we bring to younger generations, to not open that wound further and talk in judgmental ways about people who are only child or have only children.
Right. Well, you bring up a subject that I don't think we've talked about here on the podcast, which is strange, because we've done over 2,100 episodes, and I thought we talked about everything.
I'm happy to bring something new here.
Yes. Well, the whole idea of starting to have a conversation with our kids about what we choose, what we want to have as a family. I think for a lot of people, we certainly don't talk about it with our kids, and it's, for a lot of people, like, oh, whatever happens, happens. And that's true with a lot of families, and there's a lot that's not always in control. But I like the idea of people making mindful, conscious choices about what type of family that they want to have.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's exactly how I felt, that the book is not something redundant, that there is still something which I didn't see much. I see a lot of self-help books for adults. Will my only child be normal once they grown up and stuff like that? But I didn't see something which will bring a good rhetoric. And I think I also draw it from my experience. So as an only child, I often heard those type of backhanded compliments or questioning opinions about me. Like, when I've been acting friendly, I've been a question like, are you sure you're an only child? Because there was this stigma coming that, oh, I should act, very egocentric. I should not be willing to share things and be kind to people. Should be very entitled, which I wasn't. And for me as a child, it was just confusing. I didn't much understood what those people talked to me. I just knew that didn't sat well with me. I knew there was something icky about it, and I couldn't pinpoint it to why exactly. And only once I grew up, I connected the dots and I say, oh. And then another reflection came to me like, oh, there is no chance that those 5-6-year-old came up with this by themselves. They heard it from another adults that told them probably, you're meeting with Dominika, just be careful. She's an only child. She might be a little egocentric. She might not share her toys or something along those lines. So I really, now being 34-year-old, seeing similar, maybe sometimes more, thoughtful comments, but still with the intention to question your choice versus not choice, as we just talked about, is just something which is upsetting. Like the couple decades passed, and we're still in the point where we feel that we are entitled to judge it or make comments about it this way or another, or ask questions which are too intrusive sometimes.
It's fascinating. I'm sitting back and I'm trying to think if I'd ever heard those stereotypes, and I don't remember them, but I'm almost 100, so there's a lot that I don't remember from my childhood. In fact, I don't know off the top of my head if there was anybody in my friend group that was an only child. I think it might have been some of my friends who were when I was much younger. But I hear that stereotype a lot when talking about homeschool kids. Oh, you're homeschooled, so you don't know how to get along with other people. You don't know how to get along with groups, and
exactly that can apply to many areas. This is basically about any stereotypes. There are stereotypes about there could be ageism, sexism, any type of stereotype, and this transfer further to different areas of life, including for example, family size. That could be one of the topic. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of talking to our kids and having conversations about not falling for stereotypes and not assuming something about somebody with very, very little knowledge.
Yes, exactly. That was my goal of that it will bring the conversation. I really hope that book will be just a background for something much more meaningful that happened between parent and a child. I really hope that this book will be one of those books when you don't just flip through pages, but there will be the questions popping up. Mommy, why she said this? Why she reacted this way? What does it mean? And because I believe when that type of conversation happened, this is where the true bonding happened between parent and a child while they read the book, not the reading per se as is, but when we can actually open it to something much bigger than just the book. So yeah. I hope for that.
Yeah. Now, I know you told me that, part of the inspiration for writing this book was that you didn't see other books like this. But there are lots of parents out there who go looking for a book and they can't find it, who don't decide, well, then I'm going to write the book. What did you always think about being a writer or a children's writer?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have lots of prompts on my computer. My computer has plenty of, as probably anybody who published ever book, folders of ideas of what I would like to talk about. But I think you need this moment when you decide, okay, that's it. I'm publishing that book, and it happened recently, exactly in reference to what I just said, that there are those comments which are also sometimes harmful to hear and a little bit sound sexist whenever you, for example, parent of an only child, and you hear, and the child, for let's say it's a girl, and you hear the questions, so where is the boy? Like, don't you want a boy? Or like, oh, you have a son. There was like, oh, don't you want this sweet little girl to have at your home? And it's like kind of a very peculiar and weirdly shaped question, in my opinion. And those type of situations come on and on in my life, because I'm in that moment when lots of people have a lot to say about not knowing whether that's decision or not decision. And I heard something once, more subtle way directed to my daughter, but it was in a way that meant to sound judgmental from another adult. And I say, okay, you know what? That's it. I really think that this is something not just to feel my, egocentric need to publish something because I wanna, but that actually could bring some value to people, because then I met another women who are only children moms or have been only children and parent and fathers. And that's kind of give me like, okay, so we have those shared experience. You shared similar things you experienced in your life. So that's something which might be of a value to people, not just value for myself, but that's how it comes to the light.
Yeah. Fascinating. I've never felt the need or the impulse to ever go up to somebody and go, hey, well, you get a girl, you should have a boy now. Or when you get a kid, not even my own kids. It's,
yeah. And that's also, when you're saying fascinating, I feel like as a society, we, especially, I don't know, in the big agglomeration when people talk about this type of topic, that we kind of learn that it's not okay to ask childless couples whether or not they gonna become or plan to become parents, because we know what those questions may entail, and we know that there could be certain background stories that might be painful for those people. But as soon as we see a family with an only child, that's all goes through the window, like, oh, they decided on one child, so they're open to possibly talking about that subject because, well, they definitely are open to having a family. So, but it works exactly the same, as I said. The secondary infertility and other problems are prevalent. So, it's like, okay, that's maybe not okay to ask those type of questions and suggest certain things. And sometimes I believe people want to maybe good, or it comes from a pure curiosity. I don't think it's always very, in a way to attack me or make me feel somehow inadequate. But still, I feel like the safe zone is better to not ask certain questions unless you have very, close relationship. I think we all as humans understand when it is right to ask it, because, for example, we are very close friends and we can talk about it, versus you are almost a stranger or complete stranger or just like acquaintance who I rarely meet, and you popping up with those questions, especially if they're coming up more than once and are just sort of like bring this weird feeling of why we continue with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what was it like growing up as an only child?
Honestly, for me, it was actually pretty good. I remember my childhood I never remember being like particularly sad about the fact that I don't have a brother or sister. I was definitely curious how it would be to have a brother or sister. I was thinking like, how they may look like, especially abated by the fact. I was liking observing other friends, especially when they have those tremendous fights in the home. And I said, sometimes like, oh my goodness, I don't have it, and that's good. But sometimes I saw nice things, and I say, oh, her sister helped her with that. That's nice. I saw good and positive. There was never this bitterness in me that I regret not having a brother or sister. But also I was not like, I feel better because I'm exactly entitled or have more things. I treat it as completely normal in a sense. Like I didn't feel like this is something which is somehow, it's just different, exactly. That this is like just another variety of a family. I only didn't like exactly those type of comments. Whenever I hear them, I knew something was off, but wasn't entirely sure what's happened, why people tell me that I'm going to be lonely and like, come with certain comments. But besides that, yeah, I was happy. I was, kind of naturally gravitating toward making friends and meeting more people and being like open towards others, because probably I was craving that, but not in a desperate way, not in a way that, it was somehow painful for me, or I look for some substitute for a brother or sister. However, I think it's important to mention that I've met people who are sad about it, that it's a hard experience, especially once our parents get older. Mm-hmm. And an only child usually is the only child who gonna take care of parents or help them in different way, shape or form, going through the elderly till the sad moment when they pass away, and they sort of are alone with it. And if somebody didn't start their own family, I believe that might be extremely painful to be sort of left alone, if you will. So there is not like there's no logic to it. I never questioned that. but and I know that there are some people who are unhappy about it. But again, this is in life. I don't think it's kind of it's equally not fair to judge only children by the fact that they are only children, because they were not the ones who decide for it. But also, it's a little bit not fair to be upset to our parents, because ultimately they are the ones who take care of another human being, and they need to assess whether or not they have physical, mental, financial capability of doing that. And us judging our parents that why you didn't give me a sibling, which is also a little bit wrong in my opinion, because well, that's not an object to be given, that's another human being. Then if you put it in that perspective, you're not so harsh towards your partner. You understand that maybe they stood something behind that decision, that this is not just as we said before, egoistic decision to, as we like to phrase it, to just have a comfortable life, or whatever may stay behind those judgmental thoughts.
Right. Yeah. We've hosted international kids in our home, and a number of the students that live with us and became part of our family were from China, where for a generation or two, single one child families was the law. And I know in the case of the kids who came over and became part of our family, the idea of chosen family was important. They would refer to certain friends and close acquaintances as family members, as my cousin or my brother and whatever.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's very interesting to learn about you, that you hosted the international students. That sounds like a very interesting and eye-opening experience by itself. But yeah, that's a very good point. I think China has like one of the highest numbers of only children because of the policy you mentioned. So I think exactly that's what I'm coming with here. With that book and my talk with you today, it's not to absolutely, sugarcoat it that being an only child is ideal, because I think no situation in life is ideal. It all depends on circumstances, how your life turned out, which this is exactly one of the quotes in my book when the girl is asking mom, people always say that they know me when they actually don't know me well, and she's asking, is it always going to be this way? And mom replies that we all pretend that we know what's going to happen next, but we just hope for the best. And in a sense, that's exactly what I try to say, that we never know. Like, we know the families with siblings who have wonderful relationship and are happy with that. Sometimes they're estranged, and actually the sibling creates, the fact that they are siblings creates more problems in their life, and it's painful experience. Sometimes being an only child is very painful experience and lonely experience, and sometimes it's beautiful. It just, again, it's just to bring it as a new, showcase it as a different way of creating a family unit. And it's sometimes just, that's the life. That's the secret of life. We don't fully know how exactly things are going to turn out. But once we are in that situation, let's not be judgmental. Let's be more like open and respectful and mindful about the fact that each person have a different life path, and they can decide versus not decide what's going to happen to them. But I think the fact that those Chinese students has, other people relating to them as relatives or close to them, like a family of choice, that's a beautiful way of coping with the lonely part of being an only child, which sometimes may happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love the idea of sitting down and talking to our kids about not being judgmental, not only of only children, but of everyone. And I especially love opportunities to talk to our kids about the fact that we don't know somebody. We can look at somebody, and I look at you, and I know you have a red shirt on and you have long hair, but beyond what you've shared with me, I don't really know your struggles, your joys, and it's really valuable for me to sit down and get to know you better. And not make judgments, but just make a friend. Make a friend instead of judgment.
Exactly. That's a great approach. That should be the quote of today's talk. And that's exactly what I wish for.
Yeah. So tell me, is there a second book that will be coming from you?
Possibly. There is one specifically which is in my mind and already on paper, and maybe going through some reviews already on that stage, but we shall see. I definitely want to write a book about topics that are important and somehow I see it's worth talking about. There's plenty of things which I've noticed as a mom now, being a mom, that my daughter, the interactions with others, and how kids learn to navigate the first social interactions is very fascinating to observe. But you can also notice certain patterns, and that always is very inspirational for me. So I have a couple of ideas in my brain, but we shall see. So far, I'm cherishing this, my baby book, and enjoying it, and I'm very happy to talk about it.
Well, we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about One and Only and find out more about you.
Okay, sure. So it's Dominika Dvorzhak. It's my last name, hard to pronounce, .weebly.com. That's my personal website. But I think easiest would be to go to my Instagram account, which is Dominika_writes. My name, Dominika, is with K written. And that's it. And then you can find my website, direct link to my Amazon page where you can find a book. And I want to mention that everybody is welcome to send me a message, not only children, parents to only children, anybody. The multiple families of multiple children are equally welcome. And again, I forgot to mention that that book is absolutely not against bigger families. I applaud them. I'm happy that there are environments that create, that are created for more children to grow in. But I think I didn't mention it before, so that's worth mentioning. That's not a battle book. That's a book to let's open to diversity.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've had a great time speaking to the author of One and Only. It's a debut picture book from our guest, Dominika Dvorzhak. Dominika, thanks so much for being with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ed. It was so nice to meet you, and I felt very welcome, and this was a very interesting talk.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment, please be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite shows. We would also be very grateful while you're hitting that subscribe button on your favorite platform if you could also write a review. It would be very, very helpful to us. It helps other folks find the podcast, growing our army that's on a mission to help all families grow closer through reading. And if you're listening on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, please be sure to let your local station manager know that you love Reading with Your Kids, and give them a big thank you from me and from you. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We have a great YouTube channel. You heard a little bit about it, about our Drawing with Your Kids videos. You can find all of those at youtube.com/Reading with Your Kids. And of course, you're always welcome to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. There's a contact button up at the top of the page you can use to send us a message. Let us know what you love about the show. Let us know what we could be doing better. And let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. And if you are an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest. Being a guest is fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all around the world about your great children's book. You can also learn about our very fun and very effective and very affordable promotion programs. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Kathi Lockwood. Please be sure to check out The King and the Monster. Also want to thank Dominika Dvorzhak. Please be sure to check out One and Only. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.